Christmas Eve, 1945. For most families, it was a night of celebration. But for one family living in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, Christmas became a nightmare. A house burst into flames. 5 children vanished. And when the fire was finally extinguished, there were no bodies, no remains, no clear explanation. Nearly 80 years later, investigators, historians, and mystery enthusiasts still ask one question: what really happened to the Sodder children? Tonight, we're going to examine every known fact, every strange clue, and every major theory behind one of America's most unsettling unsolved mysteries. George Sodder had immigrated from Italy years earlier and built a successful trucking business in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Together with his wife Jenny, they raised 10 children. Friends described the family as hard-working and close-knit. But George was outspoken. He openly criticized the fascist government of Italy and its leader, Benito Mussolini. According to later accounts, his political opinions angered some members of the local Italian community. One insurance salesman reportedly became so furious during an argument that he warned George his house would burn down and his children would be destroyed. At the time, George dismissed it as an empty threat. December 24, 1945. The younger children begged to stay awake and play with their new Christmas toys. George and Jenny agreed. Around 10 p.m., everyone else went to bed. Then, at about 12:30 in the morning, Jenny was awakened by a ringing telephone. A woman asked for someone Jenny had never heard of. Laughter echoed in the background. The caller apologized for dialing the wrong number. Jenny returned to bed. Before falling asleep again, she noticed something unusual. The lights downstairs were still on. The curtains were open. The doors were unlocked. The children who had stayed awake had apparently forgotten to lock up. She turned off the lights and went back upstairs. Around 1 a.m., Jenny suddenly woke again. This time she smelled smoke. The house was on fire. George rushed upstairs, but flames had already engulfed the staircase. He shouted for the 5 children sleeping upstairs. No answer. The family escaped through the front door, but 5 children never came out. Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jenny, Irene, Betty. George desperately searched for the ladder normally kept beside the house. It was gone. He tried using one of his trucks to climb onto the roof. Neither truck would start, despite working perfectly the previous day. By the time firefighters finally arrived hours later, the house had completely collapsed. Officials concluded the children had died in the fire. Death certificates were issued only days later, but almost immediately, the Sodder family noticed disturbing inconsistencies. Investigators reported finding no complete human remains. Modern fire specialists have pointed out that ordinary house fires rarely burn hot or long enough to completely destroy every bone. Even cremations typically leave skeletal fragments. During a later re-examination, only a few bone fragments were found, and analysis suggested they most likely belonged to an older individual and had not been exposed to the fire, leading investigators to believe they were unrelated to the missing children. The mystery only deepened. Telephone wires had apparently been cut. The missing ladder was later found away from the house. Witnesses claimed they had seen strangers watching the Sodder home before the fire. One woman later told investigators she had seen the missing children with several adults at a roadside hotel shortly after Christmas. Another witness believed she had seen them traveling through another state. None of these sightings were ever verified. Years later, a mysterious photograph arrived in the family's mailbox. It appeared to show an adult man resembling Louis Sodder. On the back was a cryptic handwritten message. The family hired a private investigator to trace it. He disappeared from the investigation and never reported back. Theory 1, the children died in the fire. This remains the official explanation. Supporters argue that the fire and the limited forensic methods of the 1940s could explain why investigators found so little evidence. Some later researchers have suggested the family's trucks may simply have been flooded during frantic attempts to start them rather than deliberately sabotaged. Theory 2, kidnapping. George believed someone deliberately set the fire. The earlier threat, the missing ladder, the disabled phone line, the reported sightings, and the photograph decades later all convinced him that his children escaped the fire but were abducted. However, no conclusive evidence has ever confirmed this theory. Theory 3, organized crime. Some writers have speculated that George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini led to retaliation from individuals connected to the local Italian community or organized crime. While this idea has been widely discussed, investigators never found evidence sufficient to prove it. It remains speculation rather than an established fact. George and Jenny refused to accept the official conclusion. They erected a large roadside billboard, displaying photographs of the 5 missing children, and offered a reward for information. The sign stood for decades and became a landmark in West Virginia. George died in 1969 without learning what happened. Jenny continued searching until her death in 1989. Other family members carried on the search into the 21st century, but no definitive answers have emerged. Nearly 8 decades have passed. No arrests, no confirmed remains, no verified sightings, no confession, only questions. Were the children victims of a tragic house fire? Or did someone use the chaos of Christmas night to make 5 children disappear forever? Unless new evidence is discovered, the fate of the Sodder children may remain one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in American history. What do you think happened? Share your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a real unsolved case, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more mysteries based on documented events.